All right, so we just finished Unit 4, which is about how to graph these linear equations, right? And we kind of had the two equations that are on the screen right now. We had y is equal to mx plus b and ax plus by equals c. Two different styles of equations that will give you a straight line as a graph. Remember, this class, Algebra A, is linear algebra. So all the stuff we're going to have kind of makes straight lines, okay? I didn't want to go straight into Unit 5, but I did want to take some time to kind of go over some word problems. Word problems tend to be the most difficult, challenging part of algebra, but they're so important to understanding how these equations work. Okay, so this video, I just want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be going over. And essentially, the idea is that we're going to give you one style of these equations but in terms of a word problem. Okay, so the challenge here is kind of breaking into steps, right? So step one to any word problem, I'm going to write this down. Step one to any word problem is you have to read it. Okay, it sounds like a very obvious thing, but a lot of times students give up as soon as they see it's a word problem because they don't even want to try it. Okay, so step one is to read it, and not only read it, but make sense of it. In other words, kind of have an idea of what's going on. Okay. And then the second step is once you understand what's going on, see if you can come up with an equation, right? So create an equation. Okay. And we're going to start with using the mx plus b because that's probably the easier one. But when you're looking at mx plus b in context of a word problem, all those things have different meanings, right? M we know is slope, but what does slope really mean in context of a word problem? What does B mean in the context of a word problem? And then same thing, we'll be looking at the other format, AX plus BY equals C, and kind of determine, okay, how does that affect a word problem? Okay. A lot of times the easiest way to understand these is through money. So a lot of our word problems will be kind of money based, like we're selling objects, or we're raising money, or we're spending money, things like that. Because money seems to make the most sense when we start talking about these word problems. But we may use some other things. Okay. Now at the end of this little half unit 4.5, the thing you should be able to do is you should be able to take one problem. I'm going to divide the space into four categories. Okay. You should be able to, part A, you should be able to solve it, right? Like if I give you guys a linear equation, if I ask you to like plug in a value, you guys should be able to solve that. That's pretty easy. B, you should be able to graph it. Okay. That's what all of last unit was about. And then C is you should be able to either develop a word problem or at least understand a word problem. And then, like the last thing, part D, is you should be able to like create your own. Okay. So, in other words, if I give you one example of a word problem, um, you should get to the point where you're confident enough that you could create your own word problem um, if you were asked to. Like come up with your own context, come up with your own style of question, go from there. Really, this last step, part D, this is really showing that you know what you're doing, right? If you can come up with your own question that makes sense, that shows that you know exactly what's going on. Okay. So in fact, the test we'll have for this little half unit will be essentially this. I'll give you one question, or maybe like two separate questions, but they'll ask you to solve it, graph it, do a word problem, and maybe create something on your own. Normally in a like a if you guys were here in person, I would have you guys create like a little mini project, which we still might do, And I'll also figure out how that works online. Okay. So again, I just wanted to give you guys a brief overview of what this little half unit is about, 4.5, and kind of give you guys context of what we're going into next before we get to unit 5.